Jon Brodie Lee was one of the most beloved wrestlers in the wrestling industry, and he was one of the best big man wrestlers in the modern era. And not only was he an amazing wrestler, but an even better human being, as he was a loving family man and a great friend to many. And he has left an indelible impact on the wrestling world. And this was evident by the outpouring of love from his industry counterparts and fans across the world upon his passing at the end of 2020. Brodie Lee debuted in 2003, and he wrestled for a myriad of independent promotions under the monikers Huber Boy 2, The Right Stuff Brodie Lee, and The Big Rig Brodie Lee. And on the independent circuit, he cultivated his unique wrestling style that was a mix of power moves with deceptive agility. On the independent circuit, Brodie Lee pioneered a new wave of athletic giants, and although he was a heavyweight, he constantly referred to himself as a cruiserweight. Brodie Lee then signed for WWE in 2012, and under the moniker Luke Harper in WWE, he made his name in wrestling. Luke Harper was a part of the massively successful Wyatt family, with Bray Wyatt, Eric Rowan, and Braun Strowman, and he was a one-time Intercontinental Champion and was a multi-time tag team champion. But despite Brodie Lee's success in WWE, it always felt that Brodie Lee had more to give during his time in WWE. Despite Brodie Lee's great promo ability, domineering size, and immense talent in the ring, Vince McMahon wasn't a particularly big fan of Brodie, and this led to Brodie's creative ideas getting shut down, and him not getting any real big singles pushes. And between this and injuries, he was used very sparingly by Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Brodie Lee was making increasingly sporadic appearances in WWE, and because of this, Brodie knew that his time in WWE had to come to an end, as he felt that he had so much more to give. So he publicly requested his WWE release, but WWE declined his request for his release. So it effectively meant that they were doing absolutely nothing with Brodie Lee, and they were holding him like he was a prisoner. But then at the tail end of 2019, 8 months after his initial request, WWE finally released Brodie Lee, and just like that, Brodie Lee was a free man, and there was this hot new promotion on the rise called All Elite Wrestling, AEW, which was a product of a wrestling revolution. And despite AEW's massive initial success, they ended off 2019 in a pretty bad manner, as the villainous faction that many people called a weird sex cult, the Dark Order, closed out the final episode of 2019 in a god-awful manner. And this is when the infamous phantom punching debacle happened.
You know who's nowhere to be found is Hangman Adam Page.
This was quite possibly the worst segment in AEW history, and the Dark Order was in a really bad place, as fans were begging AEW to scrap the Dark Order as a whole. But there was something that the Dark Order kept promising, and this was the arrival of the Exalted One. The Exalted One was the behind-the-scenes leader of the Dark Order who orchestrated all of the Dark Order's antics. The Dark Order teased the arrival of the Exalted One for months and months, and even though fans weren't too keen on the Dark Order as a faction, the anonymity, mystery, and intrigue of the Exalted One piqued people's interest in the Dark Order. The Exalted One was heavily rumored to be Matt Hardy, as he constantly teased being the Exalted One, and it seemed like Matt Hardy's broken brilliance was the only thing that could save the sinking ship that was the Dark Order. And on the March 18th edition of AEW's Dynamite, that was supposed to have taken place in Brodie Lee's hometown of Rochester, New York, but was relocated to Daily's Place in Jacksonville, Florida due to the first outbreak of coronavirus, Matt Hardy did appear in AEW, but it was not as the Exalted One of the Dark Order. Instead, Brodie Lee was shockingly introduced as the Exalted One and the leader of the Dark Order. And this was everybody's reaction to this.
What the hell?
It was so awesome to see Brodie Lee in AEW, because as a viewer, you knew how much potential Brodie Lee had that he did not fulfill in WWE. But now he was in AEW, and you knew he was going to knock it out of the park. When Brodie Lee arrived in AEW as the tyrannical leader of the Dark Order, he drew comparisons to Vincent Kennedy McMahon because he had certain mannerisms and actions that were analogous to Vincent Kennedy McMahon, like the fact that Brodie Lee didn't like the Dark Order sneezing in his presence, just like how Vince McMahon notoriously hates people sneezing in his presence. These Vince McMahon comparisons slowly dissipated as time went on, and Brodie Lee won a bunch of matches and entered into a feud with the then AEW World Champion Jon Moxley. And Brodie Lee and Jon Moxley have a history that spanned many years across the independents, WWE, and now AEW. So one week on AEW Dynamite, Brodie Lee's Dark Order proceeded to brutally attack Jon Moxley after a match of his, and Brodie Lee told Jon Moxley that he was not the same man that he had faced in the past and all those years ago, and that he was very, very different now, and that Jon had something that he wanted: the AEW World Championship. And so Brodie Lee stole the AEW World Championship from Jon Moxley, and for the next few weeks, Brodie had possession of the AEW World Championship, and Jon Moxley and Brodie Lee's feud culminated at AEW's Double or Nothing 2020. And this match was really, really good, as Brodie Lee was even busted open after he received a paradigm shift through the stage set. Unfortunately, Brodie Lee lost this match, but it showed that given the chance, Brodie Lee thrives in the spotlight and he's more than capable at a main event level. And just like that, Brodie Lee had proved everything that Vince McMahon thought about him to be wrong. Brodie Lee also managed to turn the Dark Order from a group that nobody really wanted to see to a group that fans were clamoring to see every week. And Brodie Lee added to the ranks of the Dark Order by adding Colt Cabana and Anna Jay to the group. And Brodie Lee helped to get the members of the Dark Order over with his megalomaniacal antics on Being the Elite. Brodie Lee was initially opposed to doing comedy skits on Being the Elite because he was playing this big, bad, intimidating character on TV, but eventually he caved in and did one skit, and from there he was hooked. And Brodie Lee on Being the Elite was comedy gold. From him belittling all the members of the Dark Order, to him throwing papers at Evil Uno's face over and over again. Or him just ripping on Alex Reynolds and John Silver non-stop. Brodie Lee really helped John Silver to get over with the AEW faithful, as the exchanges were hilarious, as Brodie Lee was always pissed off at John Silver's childlike antics. Also on Being the Elite, Hangman Adam Page approached Brodie Lee, and he said that a couple months back, he filled out a form to join the Dark Order, but he never heard back from the Dark Order, so he gave up on trying to join. And this pissed Brodie off so much because Hangman Adam Page would have been a huge addition to the Dark Order. So after one of Hangman Adam Page's matches, Brodie Lee came down to the ring along with the Dark Order, and he gave Hangman another chance to join the Dark Order, but Hangman declined, and he said that he doesn't feel like joining a cult. And this offended Brodie Lee, so the Dark Order proceeded to beat the crap out of Hangman Adam Page. It's a shame that we couldn't get to see the continuation of the storyline, because apparently Hangman Adam Page was the one who was supposed to free the Dark Order from Brodie Lee's grips. But anyway, after this, Brodie Lee entered into a feud with the red-hot Cody Rhodes, who was the TNT champion at the time, and Cody Rhodes was having the run of his life with the TNT championship, as he was arguably the hottest babyface in wrestling at that time because of his open challenge for the TNT championship. And Brodie Lee answered to the open challenge for the TNT championship, and just like that, their first match was set. And what happened in this match left everybody absolutely shocked. Brodie Lee squashed Cody Rhodes in about 3 minutes in a dominating fashion. It literally took Brodie Lee a few minutes to win the TNT championship, and Cody Rhodes was carried off on a stretcher. Brodie Lee got even more heat on him as he began to attack Arn Anderson, and he brutalized the already decimated Cody Rhodes even further. Everybody watching Brodie Lee beat up Cody Rhodes was left like this. And Brodie Lee closed out that episode of AEW Dynamite with the massacred Nightmare family laid out before him, holding the TNT championship high above his head. And in this moment, Brodie Lee looked like $1,000,000. And Brodie's obliteration of Cody Rhodes really solidified him as a monster heel in AEW, and it showed everybody how terrifying and good a fully unleashed Brodie Lee can be. After this match, Cody Rhodes disappeared for a while, and the following week after Brodie won the TNT championship, he had a celebration in which the Dark Order came out and were dancing with the Coffin. The Coffin was covered with Cody Rhodes' Nightmare Family crest, and this symbolized how Cody was absolutely destroyed the previous week. Seeing the TNT Championship with Brodie Lee just felt so right, and he defended the TNT Championship successfully against Dustin Rhodes and Orange Cassidy. But then about 5 weeks after Cody had disappeared, a black-haired Cody Rhodes returned to confront Brodie Lee. And Cody Rhodes laid out the Dark Order, but Brodie Lee just managed to get away. And backstage, Brodie Lee cut an amazing and captivating promo promo on Cody. Brodie Lee's "Brodie's gonna cut you down" promo was the stuff of legends, as Brodie lambasted Cody for taking time away from the ring while he was working his ass off in AEW. And then Brodie challenged Cody Rhodes to a dog collar match to settle their feud, and he gave Cody Rhodes 1 week to answer. The intensity that Brodie Lee channeled in this promo was palpable, and quite honestly, this could arguably be the greatest promo that Brodie Lee has ever cut. The following week, Cody Rhodes accepted Brodie Lee's dog collar match, and he promised that both of them will leave everything in the ring and they will leave much different from how they came in. And then Brodie Lee came out and a big brawl broke out in which the two men had to be separated from each other. And just like that, the dog collar match was set. And there was a lot of pressure on Cody Rhodes and Brodie Lee for this match, because the dog collar match is historically notorious for how brutal and bloody it is. But boy did Brodie Lee and Cody Rhodes live up to the hype they created. I talked about this match more in my top 5 most bloodiest matches in AEW history video, so go check that out if you haven't, and leave a like if you haven't already. But anyway, this match was as brutal and bloody as everybody had expected, as both men had a crimson mask throughout this match. This match was nail-biting, edge of your seat stuff, and will go down as one of the most brutal matches in AEW history. And to everybody's shock, Cody Rhodes picked up the win and got back the TNT title, ending Brodie Lee's reign at 46 days. And this finish didn't leave fans too happy. People were very upset at the outcome because it was revealed that Cody Rhodes only left for 5 weeks because he had to go and film a competition show called the Go Big Show. So basically it meant that initially Cody Rhodes only put Brodie Lee over so that he could go to Hollywood. People were upset at this because people felt that Brodie Lee's title reign was cut too short, especially considering how much Brodie Lee was killing it as the TNT champion. And a lot of people felt that Brodie Lee should have won the match because it felt like Brodie Lee was a sacrificial lamb to Cody Rhodes' ego. And this sowed the first seeds of why so many people hate Cody Rhodes today and why he's such a polarizing figure. I'll go deeper into this topic in a Cody Rhodes so far video that I'll release soon, so keep your eyes open for that. But anyway, despite the negative response to the finish of this match was still really great, and it was praised for its brilliance and is very fitting for Brodie Lee's last match ever, as it is arguably Brodie Lee's greatest match ever. But then after this match, Brodie Lee disappeared, and during a press call, Tony Khan was asked about Brodie Lee's long absence from AEW, and he stated that Brodie Lee was just taking some time off to heal some nagging injuries. But then on the 26th of December 2020, Brodie Lee's wife, Amanda Huber, announced that Brodie Lee had passed away from a non-COVID related lung issue. And it was later revealed that Brodie Lee died from a rare lung condition called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. But we're not going to get into the behind the scenes of Brodie Lee's passing, out of respect to his family and Brodie himself. But the news of Brodie Lee's passing left the entire wrestling world shocked and devastated. And tributes for Brodie Lee came from every corner of the wrestling world. Brodie Lee's death was so heartbreaking because he was only 41 years old and he was on the run of his life, and the news of his death came out of nowhere. And on December 30th, 4 days after his passing, AEW held a tribute show for Mr. Brodie Lee, and this was one of the most beautiful tribute shows of all time and was perfect in every single way, as AEW made sure to honor Brodie Lee in the greatest way possible. And throughout the show, there were tributes from wrestlers sharing their stories and feelings about Brodie. The AEW roster also wore RIP Brodie Lee armbands and Brodie Lee t-shirts in honor of Brodie, and Lance Archer even wore a white tank top and blue jeans as gear to commemorate Brodie Lee's time in WWE as Luke Harper. The Dark Order were booked in every single match, and by the end of the night, they had a clean sweep of victories as they won every single match. And in one match, so MJF was harassing Brodie Lee's 8-year-old son, Brodie Lee Jr., and Brodie Lee Jr. whacked MJF in the head with a kendo stick, which was so satisfying to watch. And also Eric Rowan, who tagged with Brodie Lee for many years in WWE, made an appearance and held up a sign that said, "Goodbye for now, my brother. See you down the road." And at this point, tears were flowing hard from everybody on screen and everybody at home. And the main event was booked by Brodie Lee Jr., and it featured his favorite wrestlers, Cody Rhodes, Orange Cassidy, and Preston Vance. And they ended up picking up the win over Team Taz. And after the main event, Brodie Lee Jr. set his father's boots in the middle of the ring, and AEW President and CEO Tony Khan awarded the TNT Championship to Brodie Lee Jr. and dubbed him the TNT Champion for life. And the Red Strap TNT Championship was retired forever. And to end the show, video, a video tribute played of Brodie Lee throughout the years with his friends and family and his time in AEW, with the song Old 55 by Tom Waits playing in the background. Tony Khan purchased the rights to Old 55 by Tom Waits in perpetuity, so the tribute will last forever. And honestly, just watching this was really a punch in the gut, as it was really sinking in that Brodie Lee was really gone, and this was so heartbreaking. This video montage was really difficult to get through because of how emotional it was, but despite this, it was the perfect way to end the show and a perfect tribute for a great man. The tributes for Brodie Lee continued as about 9 months later in Rochester, New York, Brodie Lee's hometown and the place that he was supposed to debut at, the love for Brodie Lee was tangible as the crowd were chanting Brodie throughout the night and holding up signs that commemorated Brodie. The Dark Order had problems at this time, but they put them aside for Brodie's sake, and this was honestly just so beautiful to see, as Brodie Lee's name was clearly living on. And before Brodie Lee, the Dark Order was one of the most hated factions in wrestling, but they turned into one of the most loved factions in wrestling. And this is all thanks to Mr. Brodie Lee. And Tony Khan signed Brodie Lee Jr. to an AEW contract that activates when he turns 18. So Brodie Lee's legacy will live on through his son. Brodie Lee was truly an exemplary man, as he was a man who prioritized his family and he was an individual who always thought of others before him. Whenever people talk about Brodie Lee, they always say positive things, and there is not a single person that knew him personally that had any negative things to say about Brodie. And that is testament to how much of an impact that he had on people. Brodie Lee would be so proud of AEW today, and I wish that we could have seen more of him in AEW. But he will always be remembered for his passion for wrestling, his love for his family, and his zest for life. He was truly the epitome of a good human, and we should all take a page out of Brodie Lee's book. RIP, and thank you to Mr. Brodie Lee. Thank you for watching the video. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. But anyway, goodbye, you jobbers.